Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are in full swing of winter, meaning that it is dark already, even in the, we're in late afternoon now, so, because I did leave this a little later than I probably should have, but yeah, we're in the late afternoon now, and I'm now being underlit from the tablet, meaning that I look like a bit of a ghoul, and it emphasizes these already poor lines, but yeah, so today, we are doing Cammy from Street Fighter 6. That is what we're doing today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about posing and referencing and things like this. And I'm going to be touching a little bit on stylistic adaptation. Because this is one of those ones, is because I'm drawing a Street Fighter character. They're quite stylized by nature, even though we're doing a Street Fighter 6 design, which is supposed to be more realistic. These characters do still have very exaggerated features, big eyes, kind of broad. They're generally quite broad. They have they're either very kind of long or very stocky. They kind of have a lot of these different interesting proportions, which are not super realistic, but they've kind of brought them a little bit closer to being realistic in Street Fighter 6. So here I'm going to be talking a little bit about some stylistic adaptation, because yeah, I've made a few concessions here and there to kind of make things a little bit more accurate to the style of the game, which I obviously wouldn't normally have. I wouldn't normally use kind of big eyes or any of these types of things, or kind of narrower faces. I wouldn't normally do that, but here I am kind of doing a little bit of that. So, yeah, without further ado, I will begin. I'll roll the intro and then I will show you what I mean by showing you the base sketch that I've already done. And yeah, in short order, I would assume the lighting is going to change dramatically, because I'll probably close the blinds and turn on the light, because it's we're in full swing winter, not much I can do about it. But yeah, and so whenever I do this, it now completely alters the lighting in the room. So yeah, anyways, yeah, intro time. Okay, so now that horridly awkward intro is done, yeah, I dropped some frames, so I'm gonna have to resync this later on, which is gonna be fun. But yeah, anyways, this is what I mean. So yeah, so I've made her eyes a little bit bigger. I've kind of narrowed down her face. I've made her shoulders a little broader. I've made her hands slightly bigger, and her hips are obviously a little wider than I would normally go. So yeah, I've kind of gone for a slightly more cartoony art style here. Slightly more, but still kind of, again, I'm trying to match sort of what they have in the game, of where things are sort of a middle ground between realistic and super stylized. They're still quite stylized, but they have realistic models, or more realistic models than you'd normally get in a Street Fighter. But yeah, so what was I going to say? Yeah, so whenever I was talking about posing, something that's important to note is that whenever you're doing posing, it's not just about how the character is being posed. I mean, that's obviously a big part of it, but you're also having to think about how do you pose the character and their various accoutrements. Like, how do you pose their hair? So here, it maybe made a poor decision. So Cammy obviously has the very prominent hair spike, but because of the angle of her head, that proposes an issue here, because this is the hair spike and it's not being emphasized super far. I mean, there's two of them, because that's how it is in the game. There's two of them and there's a little one. So the two big ones here, they're poking out here. This one's slightly less obvious, because you can obviously see the underline of her head isn't kind of really poking out much. So yeah, I'll emphasize these a little bit more whenever I'm doing the details in a little bit. But things like, obviously, her eyes, very big, and her mouth, small, because these are kind of the features that they give her in the game, where she's got kind of big eyes and small mouth, and a slightly kind of narrower head. So yeah, these are the kind of things, and obviously big hands. So these are the kind of, well, not like big hands, but bigger than I might normally do. These are the kinds of features that I'm kind of emphasizing here, and obviously she's got very wide hips, because because she has very wide hips in game. These are not as wide as they are in game. They're very wide. But yeah, I'm actually going to have to make some adjustments here because this angle isn't quite right here. This kind of hip curve isn't quite right. It should kind of smooth out. This is kind of, you can see that it's kind of like got this kind of jaggedness here, and then it kind of dips in a little bit. That looks weird. It should kind of curve more smoothly, and then dip in slightly to form into the shape of the thigh. But obviously, because her full thigh is not show, it's not quite there. But yeah. But whenever you're worrying about posing, as I was saying, you don't need to just worry about the shape of the hair. Or you don't need to just worry about the shape of the body. I mean, obviously, it's obvious that I use reference for this. But whenever you're doing referencing, something that's important is that you change up you alter things from the reference. For example, the pose that I used had both arms down. This arm was like touching the leg, and this arm was I think behind. I think this arm was behind the kind of torso. But for all intents and purposes, like certain things, like I think this leg, I think both the legs were more forward, and the face position was slightly more over there, I think. But yeah, this is the thing. It's important to alter things, not just proportionally, because I did also do that, obviously, but whenever you're using reference, it's very important to alter things, because you don't want to be in a position of where you're using reference and the reference just is the final product, because it's not transformative. And that's what you want. If you're using the reference, you're going to want it to be transformative. And that's what I think I've managed to achieve here. I hope I've managed to achieve, is that I've made this transformative. Because I've put this hand is new, it's entirely new, this arm is entirely new, this arm I moved, and the hand position is slightly different, her head position is slightly different, her body position is, again, was slightly flatter, so I tilted it more. Not even that I tilted it, but I have her moving slightly more in this direction. And again, it's important to be transformative about these things, because again, I changed the proportions, that's obvious, but I also changed the pose on fundamental level. So it's not just the reference anymore, it's now something that I've started with a reference image, and I've done something transformative. And that's the important thing, is to be transformative, because when you're not transformative, that's whenever there's legal issues. So on one level there's legal issues because stock companies are litigious, so if you're using stock images as your reference images, and you're not being transformative enough, that's whenever you get sued. But yeah, it's important to be transformative, not just for legal reasons, but also for artistic reasons, because you're not getting much artistic expression out of just using the reference image. But yeah, on the level of posing, on more preamble, because I'm doing lots of preamble this time, because I suppose all the stuff that I need to talk about is it is preamble. But yeah. So when posing, again, it's not just the figure, it's not just the hair, it's not just the normal features of the body, it's also the clothes and stuff like this. So, for example, whenever I was putting this pose together, I felt like I'd maybe given myself too much space. Like obviously this area here is there's a lot of negative space going on here, which was obviously intentional, but I think there's maybe a little too much of it. But then I was like, oh yeah, she has the long, really long belt, which is supposed to form the shape of the braids from the older designs. And so I was like, oh, I'll use those to kind of fill out the space a little bit more, and it sells the movement. Because these are pushing in this way, it obviously says, oh, well, there's wind coming in from this direction, which is pushing them that way, which means the coat flaps out slightly that way. And or yeah, the jacket kind of flaps out slightly that way because this is where the wind is coming from, and also she's moving more in this direction, so it sells the kind of flow of things, the flow of the motion. It all kind of curves in like this, is how it kind of feels anyways. I think that's how it's coming across. But yeah, that was a lot of preamble. That was a full 10 minutes of rambling. But yeah, this, again, I just felt like doing this character. It's not a thing of where I was like with some of the other ones that I've been doing recently, where it was a character who I did in the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 mural, who I wasn't fully satisfied with, like with Ryu. That was why I did Ryu, but this one I just kind of wanted to do it. I like this design, it's fun. And so I said, hey, I might as well. I've already done Street Fighter character recently. It'd be fun to do another one. But yeah, maybe I feel like I have rambled enough. But I think maybe I got across some good information. But yeah, so you might see what I'm talking about a little bit more as I'm I think I might maybe make this hand slightly smaller. This hand feels maybe too big. No, you know what? The hands are actually probably fine because they're supposed to be kind of big. But yeah, this I'll need to fix. I'll need to fix the kind of flow of this hip, and I'll need to emphasize the kind of hair spiking thing again. But yeah, you'll probably see the lighting change pretty soon because the lights are coming on outside now, so I'll probably put on lights now. But yeah, so I will probably begin the actual drawing of this now, given that that's what I normally am supposed to be doing here. But I guess, yeah, you might have gained some information, some potentially useful information out of my ambling ramblings. But yeah, I will begin. Okay, so we're at the 3-hour mark. I was going to try and make this one quick, but it doesn't seem as though that's happening. And yeah, it's getting later in the evening, so I think I will try and see how much of this I can get done. I'll see if I can get the colors done. But yeah, I think I'm probably gonna stick with just a solid color background. This button here is obviously supposed to have a little design on it, but I'll do that with the colors because I don't want, because it's not big enough of where the design would really come across in lines. It would just start getting busy. So what I'll do is I will go in with my red because it's red, and I'll just do a little circle and then do a triangle because that's the kind of shape of it vaguely. But yeah, since there's not a huge amount of colors going on here, so this shouldn't take too long. I might really be able to get the rest of this done pretty quick, because I mean, details here are the hard part, because I mean, the nature of doing these kind of bigger figure on a like less of a figure, but the figure is bigger. The thing with doing these is that obviously there's going to be more details because it's technically more zoomed in, is the thought process, is that it's more zoomed in, so you're going to be seeing a little bit more of them. I think I fixed some of the kind of minor issues. I think I smoothed some things out. Yeah, I think, yeah, like the hands I don't think look too alien. This hip here is kind of fixed now. I think it's still maybe not perfect, but it's yeah, it's got the kind of the sort of the line moves in a kind of a smooth way now, so it's not quite so jarring as it was before, that it felt kind of too flat. Well, maybe it is slightly too flat. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just do something like this, just kind of thicken out the line a little bit, and that way it might kind of hide some of that, so that it just, and then just thin it out a little bit on the inside so that it kind of looks like it's buffing out a little bit, so that it maybe sells the smoothness slightly more. Because yeah, we don't want the line to seem like it's kind of abruptly kind of dipping in, because that's not really how, well, I mean it is, but that is kind of sort of how these things look. They don't necessarily have perfect smooth lines, but here, because we're dealing with a style difference, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have these kinds of little things of where they kind of dip out. Oops. They kind of dip out in more extreme ways, and they kind of form more definite shapes. Yeah, maybe that's a little better. That seems a little smoother now. I think that looks a little smoother, more or less. I mean, it's not a massive difference, but I mean, it does enough. So our background color, I'm just going to use a blue. And I'll probably do the background, the gradient maps thing that I've done before. So what is her color? It's a kind of a baby blue, is the sort of color. It's a deep baby blue, is the sort of angle of it. It's along this kind of spectrum. Maybe more like this. So what I'll do is I'll get one which is like this, or you know, I might get one which is all the way over here, because I'm not going to be using this exactly. I'm going to be getting a slightly duller one for her blue. So yeah, she's got a paler skin tone, which falls more on the orange scale. Put it about there. Should do. Yeah, I think I kind of got the idea of what I want here, more or less. So the colors are pretty simple. Now there is actually a pattern here. There is this kind of hexagonal pattern. Now what I might do is I will see, because I've shown my pattern brushes before. I've shown them. I'll see after I've done the colors. I'll see if I can do that. If I can do the pattern here. Yeah, I'll see if I can do that pattern here and here, because that's where the kind of hexagonal pattern falls in. So yeah, I'll see if I can do that. later on as I'm going. We'll see if that works, because it might not work. So we'll just give it a go. It might not, it might work, who knows. We'll see, I'll give it a go. But if it doesn't, oh well, I'll just leave it flat. It should do, more or less. But anyways, I've got a few kind of little details that I'll have to go over later. But alright, let's give this a go. Let's see if I can finish these colors. And yeah, I suppose I'll either be back on another day, or I will be, well, I mean, it's still gonna be the same video. But yeah, I'll be back, I guess, regardless, with the painting. I'll be back once I've done the colors, I think. Anyways, I forget the flow of these things. It's actually been quite a while since I've done one of these videos. But yeah, anyways. Okay, so it is now the following day. I have returned, and we are going to now do the painted shading. So you may have noticed during the colors section, I did this pattern here. Now, the pattern that is normally on these leggings is like a hexagonal pattern, but here you can obviously see this is just more or less a crosshatch pattern. So I just was like, compromise. This is, I wanted to have the impression of it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be it, so to speak. So here we've got it's the idea of it. It's the next best thing. So yeah, yeah, I've gone for largely some very bright colors here. And obviously our painted shading is going to dull those a little bit. So namely, I think, I'm trying to think of what color palette we're going to be going for here. I would think that we'd largely be kind of sticking to sort of bluey tones, but I'm not sure. Thinking purple is probably going to be our darker shade anyways. What's going to be our lighter shade? Should it just be the yellow again? That's probably fine to maybe do. The problem is that the yellow isn't very close to blue, nor is it very close to red, meaning that it's going to wash out those tones quite a bit. We'll see. I'm definitely thinking about purple, because purple kind of works with most of these for the most part. And then I kind of for the blue here, what I might do is I might make this the lighter tone of this something slightly bluer, maybe. I don't know. We'll see what I do. We'll see what I do here, anyways. So I won't dilly-dally too long, because I want to get the rest of this finished reasonably fast. But yeah, so yeah, I will do this painted shading, and then I will be back to do the detailed shading. So yeah. Okay, so that is our painted shading done, and so I've done a little bit here to try and, because there's a few different materials going on here, tried to sell the materials in a reasonable way. Like the jacket obviously has a slight bit more sheen to it in a lot of a lot of these in-game images I'm seeing, so I decided to kind of give it this kind of three-tone thing of where there's obviously the dark with the purple, then there's a slightly lighter blue which I used for some shading, then I used like a near white blue for the rest of it. Did the same thing with the red because the gloves have this kind of these metallic bits to them which have a tiny little bit of sheen, but it's not quite that intense, it's very mild. And I did it as well with the kind of just the rest of the gloves as well, with the black on the gloves. And then obviously the kind of exercise gear is a more, it'd be like a, I don't know, like a lycra material, something like that, something which wouldn't be super shiny, I don't know, something not super shiny or anything like that, so I just gave it kind of a bit of a duller look. But yeah, now I'm going to do the detailed shading, and I'll throw in the light line into this as well. So I've gone for kind of the same thing that I did with the Dante one, of where I decided to make it kind of a little bit duller in terms of its tones. Yeah, the tones that I've gone for are somewhat dull. Not even dull, but it's very light shading. It's not like super dark or anything like that. It's still moderately light in color. But obviously whenever we put on like all our gradient maps and stuff like that, that will darken it quite considerably. And there's going to be two textures going onto this, because since we're just doing a flat color background, I'll throw a separate texture on the background, and that'll kind of just give that a little bit of an extra little bit of tone. And then obviously there'll be one texture over everything, which will be a little milder. But yeah. So yeah, I will do this detailed shading. I'll do the light line as well, and then I will be back with the final touches. Okay, so that is our detailed shading done, which means that it's more or less us done. We've got a few tiny little bits to do. I should probably do a signature here first before I start slapping any of this extra stuff on. Yeah, it's probably oh god, it's probably a good idea that I did the three-tone shading on the jacket, because it's not a different enough color from the background, I think, where it would have stood out otherwise. It still kind of blends in, which is kind of the purpose of using the color so similar anyways. Yeah, using a color so similar to the background, the kind of point of doing that would be to have it slightly blend. And that's more or less what I wanted. It did somewhat blend. But regardless, yeah. So now I'm going to do the gradient maps. So, new adjustment layer, gradient map. Now the first thing I'm thinking is I don't know what color I actually want to do here. I think... If I do tones of blue. So we'll go from a purpley one here to a slightly a light blue like that. So this should have a colder palette, more or less. Let's try this. How's that looking? That looks okay, more or less. It's a little dark, maybe. Maybe you want to brighten this up. Yeah, brighten that up a little bit. That should do it. And then let's have a look, see what this is like an overlay. Okay, it's pretty intense. Soft light. It's still pretty intense. Oh, I mean, this is the thing. It's only a three-tone color palette this time, where ordinarily I'd use... that does wash it out quite considerably. Maybe I don't want it to be... Yeah, maybe I don't want it to be too blue. Maybe I actually want to warm this up a little bit. Maybe I want it to be somewhere on the yellow tone. Like that. Maybe you want to have this then be red. Be a more of a kind of a sunsetty tone to it. Maybe make this more like that, and then maybe get this yellow and make it a little bit of a lower tone. How does that look? It's very warm now. We got the opposite problem now. So if I make this, okay, so I can check. So this is our warmer one. This is our cold one. Cold one, it works, I suppose. The warm one is very intense, but it makes you stand out from the background. And the cold one is obviously cold. I don't do cold color palettes very often. Maybe we'll stick with this one. Maybe that's what we'll stick with. Yeah, I think we'll stick with the cold one. And we'll see how this works, you know, whenever I start making duplicates. So we're going to want the luminosity. Luminosity should actually... Yeah, the luminosity mostly just makes it a little darker. But now the big question is the color burn. Color burn might not be necessary here, because the color burn will make it very blue. It's mostly on the background. Actually, no, I don't mind this because it separates the background color a little bit more. Yeah, let's go with that. That's at 6. It should be a little lower. So, right, those are our gradient maps. So now I'm going to need to get my texture, and we'll throw that over the top, and then we'll see how that blends, more or less. But yeah, overall, this was a pretty okay one. Wasn't that bad in terms of difficulty, because I've been doing a lot of ones recently which just take ages, and I think particularly after doing that Black Cat one, which was tremendously hard, that has now perhaps change my feelings on doing difficult ones. So, do we want a lot of texture or do we want mild texture? I think we want mild texture over the top because we're making a duplicate here. I'll be duplicating this, and we'll bring it all the way down to here. And then now what we'll do is we'll flip it horizontally so it doesn't overlap with anything we've already got. So basically now we've got a pretty intense texture on the background, which kind of changes the shape of the texturing and it kind of makes it a little bit more blended. But overall we've got this kind of softer texture which also goes onto the character, so let me zoom in here and see how much it's visible. It's moderately visible. Again, it's not very intense, so it's just there to kind of lighten it up a little bit because all these gradient maps. So yeah, this is the thing. On screens, a lot of the gradient maps don't come out quite the same way. Like obviously on the tablet screen here, it's very dark. But on a phone screen or on a tablet screen or on the computer screen, it does look a little different. It's not quite as intense. It's a little bit more moderate in terms of the actual color balance of it. But yeah, so that was us more or less. Yeah, as I say, this wasn't too hard. I tried a few different things like the three-tone shading here. It's a thing I've done every now and then, but I generally don't do it all the time. It's a little bit more time consuming to do the three-tone shading. It is, yeah, considerably more time consuming, I'll say. But yeah, so that was that. I feel like there's a thing which I intended on saying. So I talked about posing at the start. I talked about references, or yeah, using reference. I talked about. Is there anything else I'm really forgetting? Because I mean, most of this, the topic of this one was technically posing. I've touched on like doing the patterns. I've talked about the three-tone shading, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like this is a pretty easy enough one. I mean, it still took two sittings in about 6 hours of total time. So these things are not quick anymore for some reason. I just can't get them done quick. But yeah, anyways, I will wrap up because there's no need to do this forever. There's no need to do outros forever, which is something which I'm just bad at remembering. I take forever with my outros, as I mean, if you've watched the whole another one of these, you probably would have figured that by now. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, if you like the video, do whatever it is that you normally do, whether it be liking it or not. I would prefer if you liked it, but you know, if you're not going to do that, you're not going to do it. And if you want to subscribe, it's the same deal. No pressure to do it, but yeah, you don't have to. I would of course prefer if you did, but you don't have to. And I don't have to tell you where the subscribe button is because you presumably watched a YouTube video before. So yeah. And yeah, if you choose to watch the next video, I will see you next time. So with all that said, that is us. And it is uncharacteristically bright at the end of one of these videos. I say uncharacteristically bright. It's nearly dark. It's getting dark now. But yeah. So, yeah. I feel like that's everything I wanted to say. I covered all my topics. And, yeah, I'm left with a finished product that I'm happy with. So, yeah. That is us. So, bye-bye.